Welcome into Phoenix Breathwork, the podcast, Breathe to Rise. My name is Jessie and I'm your host. I will be using this platform to share the power and magic of breathwork and to empower you to be able to transform your life as much as I have mine. I will share my experiences and will be inviting on some incredible guests to share their stories too. Look forward to guided breathwork practices and meditations to help you explore and build your own relationship with yourself and your breath. Get settled in and enjoy what's to come. Make sure to like, share and subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I will ensure to keep creating more. I hope you are inspired in some way. Let's breathe to rise. Hello and welcome into the next episode of Phoenix Breathwork, the podcast, Breathe to Rise. I have got the most wonderful guest here with me. So someone who is not only a good friend, but an incredibly experienced breathworker, Russell Storey. Now, Russell has been working with the breath now for, I think, about 15 years and has been integral in my journey because Russell was there right at the beginning when I did my first seminar in Brazil, and we've remained connected and worked together many times since. What I love about your journey, Russell, is that you have been doing this breath for such a long time. You've seen the breath work evolve, not just in your own practice, but I guess everywhere as well. And you have incorporated other things into your breath practice as well. And what I love from the time we spent together recently, well, it was last year now, is that you have now been studying astrology and incorporating the astrological world into breath and vice versa as well. So I think this is so fascinating and would love you to share a little bit about that, what you're doing and your journey with the breath and astrology and just what you're doing at the moment with all of that.
How it's linking up. Well, I guess firstly saying thanks for having me back, and thanks for inviting me on your podcast. It's so good to see you. And I find these conversations, they're kind of rejuvenating in a way because I don't talk about this stuff very often. And as you know, the connection between breath workers is extremely rare and special. There aren't that many of us. And yeah, I was thinking just as you were chatting there, as if being a breath worker wasn't odd enough. Now I've had astrology kind of find its way into my life experience, and yeah. So for those who don't know, life's been pretty strange over in Australia this last few years, and it's kind of tipped a lot of things up on its head, and certainly tipped my life plans up on their head. I arrived back in 2019. I think it was 2021. We spoke for our initial chat, Jess, and yeah, it's things have really been turned on their head over here, and I won't go into all of that, other than to say, I found my freedom very restricted, and my ability to roll out breathwork trainings and programs and those kinds of things were obviously greatly reduced given all the restrictions and challenges that we faced into over here, and not being one to waste my time to the best of my ability, I actually had a moment of. I was sitting on one of the chairs here, just thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life? What do I need to do next? And I, out of the corner of my eye, my friend Angela, a mutual friend of ours, had recommended a book called Cosmos and Psyche, which is by a gentleman called Richard Tarnas, who wrote the Passion of the Western Mind, and it's an encyclopedic book about that thick, and it's all about astrology. And I just had this thought of, oh my God, not astrology. Like being a breath worker has taken me far enough off of the beaten path. But not being one to shy away from my intuition, and I've learned one of the things that I have learned over my journey as a breath worker, as you say, those 15 years or so, is it's strengthened that faith muscle, that trust muscle to trust, when that intuition comes, to really go with it. So I embarked on the journey that was Cosmos and Psyche. As I said, it's a very thick book, but it completely revolutionized the way I saw the world. I thought astrology was something, that you read in the newspaper, and there was 12 signs and how many stars was going to, and I thought the whole thing was really quite ridiculous, to be perfectly honest. And What I didn't realize it was that it was my perception that was actually the incorrect one. And so similar with breath, having the courage to remain open to new ideas and new possibilities, even when they go against, your current way of thinking. It opened a doorway into a whole new reality for me of learning how to interpret the world, and learning that time works in cycles rather than, necessarily linearly. And that astrology is actually this vast body of knowledge, which is in many ways accumulated wisdom, this archetypal wisdom that's been gathered, over millennia, right? The way back from, I think it was the Babylonians and co that, that were initially doing this kind of research and sense making as, our place in the universe. And so yeah, so I was running my regular calls over here, my regular online calls. So when all that kind of hit, all the COVID stuff hit, I got everybody online, and I'm pleased to say those calls are still going nearly 4 years later. But it actually gave me a lot of time to watch people breathe, which again, to the uninitiated may sound like an incredibly boring thing, but for those of us who are breath workers, it's quite a fascinating hobby.
Fascinating.
And then the relationship between how people breathe and the patterns that then start to show up in their lives. And so I had the inspiration of these two worlds kind of coming together. And so I started mapping out the astrological archetypes onto the body map, which we use in transformational breath, but also from my own experience of the little nuances and subtle changes that you can witness in somebody's breathing, and how that might sort of link up with these astrological themes, the 12 archetypes of the zodiac. And lo and behold, a lot of the correlation seems to hold. And so I'll touch on it. Shall I touch on it briefly, Jessie? I don't want to go into too much detail to overwhelm people, but hopefully give people sort of a sense of how this sort of comes to life.
Please do, because I'm already forming questions in my mind. I'm like, I'd like to know more about this. What do you mean? How is it linked to that? So do please expand. Yeah.
Okay. So if you think of, I'll assume sort of, a base level of knowledge about the planets here. I won't go into too much detail, but essentially in astrology, we've got 10 astral bodies that we work with in old school astrology. We've got the sun and the moon. We've got Mars, Venus, and Mercury. We've got Jupiter and Saturn, and then we've got the 3 outer planets of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And these all have different symbolic representations in the astrological world. There's more if you really follow the astrology. They're getting into there's the planets beyond Pluto and all that kind of stuff, but we won't go there. But essentially, if we were to break it down, the symbols of those, I guess those planets, you've got the luminaries, which is the sun and the moon. So they're what light up the sky. The sun obviously during the day, and then the moon during the night. And then we've got Mercury, which is our thinking, how we think and how we communicate. We've got Venus, which is how we then relate. Mars is how we act, how we do things to make things happen. So they're called our personal planets. And then we have Jupiter and Saturn. So and they're known as the regulators. So they're the 2 biggest planets in the solar system. And then we have the outer planets, which are, as I say, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which we call those the transpersonal planets. So these tend to be the more thematic components of our lives. They're less personal, more because they move slower around the sun. They tend to have a deeper and longer term impact. And but anyway, in the body map and transformational breath, which you may have spoken about with other people on podcasts and the like, maps out our breathing. And so when we're working with people, we tend to not just watch where they are and aren't breathing, but we sometimes place our hands on different parts of their body. And so and usually where we want the breath to move to. And then there'll be an associated affirmation that will come with that. So for example, somebody not breathing in the belly, we might place a hand on the belly and affirm to them that it's safe for me to breathe. And so what I did was mapped out these planetary archetypes over that body map. And so for example, the sun and the moon. The sun is a yang energy. It's an expressive. The sun shines, it radiates out, whereas the moon receives the light of the sun. It has no light of its own. And so that correlates to the right-hand side of the body, which is the sun is about how we express. It's the masculine. Yeah. And then we have the moon, the lunar energy, the feminine, the receiving energy. Okay, so that basically splits our body in half of the sun and the moon. And then we've got Mercury, Venus, and Mars. And so again, roughly speaking, Mercury speaking about communication and thinking, and so our throat, and then across the tops of our shoulders. And then Venus, this is the chest. This is how we relate to other people, our heart center, how we connect to others. And then Mars, which is our belly, which is our power center. So how do we ground and be present, which is a very sort of Martian archetype. And then further down the body, we've got well, I won't go into too much detail, but on the thighs, we've got our Mars and our Venus again. Being the Mars being the expressive, and the Venus being the receptive, and that can be connected to our ancestors and our relationships with men and women. And then down in the calves, we've got the outer planets of Uranus and Neptune. So Uranus is the liberator that wants to set us free, and then Neptune is more connected to our consciousness and spirituality and all these types of things. And so the different points start to link up when I'm working with people in a session as to what are these archetypes and how are they interrelating to one another. The really interesting part for me was around Jupiter and Saturn, and these being the regulators. And anyone who's a scuba diver will know that that's what the little mouthpiece is called, a regulator, around how do we breathe air out of the tank and balance it up. But essentially Jupiter being the expansive, Zeus, Jupiter, the ruler of the gods, is all about expansion, making things bigger. He's known as the planet of abundance, and is the great benefic is Jupiter, and giving us the gifts. And so this correlates to the inhale. This is the expansion of our body during the inhale. And then when we reach the top of our inhale, we hit our limit. And Saturn is the furthest planet out that we can see with the naked eye. And so it was symbolic of the end, the limit of our consciousness. And so when we reach the top of the inhale, we let go, and the exhale falls away. And so we've got the Jupiter in, Saturn out. And so that's kind of how it ties together. And then the last planet, you might have, for those keenly listening, noticed that I haven't spoken about Pluto. And so Pluto, as the astronomers will know, actually got downgraded from being an official planet. It's known as a dwarf planet. But it still holds a pretty important place in astrology. And for me, Pluto symbolizes the connection of the breath. And it's because it's the soul. The Pluto represents the soul. And it also correlates to, we've got a point down below the belly button known as the subconscious death urge, where this is and so in evolutionary astrology, which is the branch of astrology that I study, they talk about the journey of the soul. And so we have two competing desires. We have the desire to go out into the world, to create, to make things, to manifest, to have the experiences that we came here to do. We also have the competing urge to return home, to know God, to know source, to know who it is at a deep level as to who we really are. And so you can kind of contain the human experience within those two forces. And then by connecting our breath, we're linking those two up. And so that's where we start to, we can generate this high energy vibration that we can create during breath work. But ultimately what we're doing is bringing ourselves into alignment with our soul path, our soul journey. And what it is that we're here to experience and to learn and grow and understand over the course of our lives. So that's a lot of information, but it's kind of it. How
you say it so casually. That's kind of it. I'm literally like blown away because it's so fascinating the way that you've linked it, or how the planets will represent different points in the body, and that's what we're trained to observe and work with anyway when we're in a breathwork session. So like this is just so cool. So are you saying that with someone's breathing pattern then, and how maybe you're working with people, if there's something going on with the planets, Mercury's gone retrograde or something like that, because I know I get all the jokes about Mercury being in lemonade again, all of this, but it is all I know about Mercury is it's a planet of communication. So when you talk about the throat here, so then do you see that in people's breathing patterns around that time then? So specifically
not so much. So again, to break it down for people, astrology is quite a complicated field, and that was one of the things that really surprised me, because I dismissed it as being sort of simplistic and a little bit ridiculous. It's actually incredibly deep. And so there's a number of different ways of relating to the planets. And so one of the reasons we ask for a birth time when we're doing an astrological reading is that improves the accuracy of the chart itself, because the chart, if the world's obviously turning at the same time as the planets are moving. And so our birth time is where we basically press pause, we press stop, and this is the exact moment where the Earth was facing and where the planets were in the sky at the moment we were born. And so that can give us a blueprint for our, the unfolding of our life here in this shared experience. What you're referring to is the transits, and so that's what the planets are doing at any moment. And so Mercury might be in retrograde, or it is in retrograde on my chart. But it can also be, obviously, at this moment, it's not moving retrograde, but I think it'll be the first planet to turn retrograde, in a month or so's time. And so the way that the planets are at the moment and the way they are, it's almost like you could say it's a comparison. That's what astrology is a comparison between where the planets were and where they are just now. And so what I've been doing in my, I guess you'd call it research with people, is I've been sort of covertly gathering their birth data when they're coming in to see me. I have an intake form. And that can give you that information about their own natal chart. And so what I tend to see, and so for example, to give you an example, so Mercury rules Gemini. And anyone knows about astrology knows that Gemini people, if you call it that, tend to be, communication is their thing. They read a lot of books. They sometimes teachers. They like words and information. And I had a guy come in to see me, and he came to see me about a very serious issue. And I was just, I checked out his birth data, and he was a Gemini. And he wouldn't shut up. He was like,
oh, wow.
Just talking. But that was his way of processing. He was attempting to process what he'd been going through. He'd gone through something extremely tragic. And so it gave me an insight into understanding that's actually how he's attempting to process. He's attempting to process this experience verbally. He's trying to process it through thinking about it. And as we know in breathwork, right, you can think about things as much as you like. You've got to feel them. Yeah. You've got to feel them. And so that's how it would start to work, would be around, recognizing that he's thinking rather than feeling. So we're going to be working somewhere in his chest, and we're probably going to, and as it transpired, getting him to breathe in his chest to feel his feelings was part of his journey. So it's less about, I guess, telling people and more about giving the practitioner the insight to be able to kind of know where to tap, so to speak. And it can give you a sort of a deeper understanding as to what might be going on in their lives. And so one of the tools that astrology brings is it can guide us through these bigger transits. So if you recall, I was talking about the planets that move slower. The most famous one that we go through is known as a Saturn return. And so a Saturn return is when Saturn returns to the same point it was the moment you were born. But it takes about 28, 29 years to do that. So people go through a Saturn return. Everybody goes through a Saturn return who lives for that long, goes through a Saturn return, which is Saturn, as we say, is about finding our limits. But it's, it can be about how we, make a long-term commitment. Perhaps we might change our job or change our career direction. We might have a child, or, some sort of significant life thing tends to happen. And so again, just being astrologically informed can allow a practitioner to understand, even just based upon someone's age, what types of things they might be going through. I'm going to be going through my Uranus opposition over the next couple of years. And Uranus oppositions are known for being the midlife crisis, the person that builds up all the responsibility to midlife, and then suddenly they ditch the wife and buy the sports car and disappear into the distance. And that's partly because Uranus is about freedom and liberation. And so when Uranus comes around and faces itself, it's showing us what we need to learn about that archetypal pattern and how it's unfolding in our lives. Doesn't mean that it's going to unfold the same way for everybody, because every human being is obviously different and has a unique path to follow. But it can give us a guide or a bigger frame for what somebody might be experiencing when they come, what the issues that they present might be a manifestation of that astrological pattern or that archetypal pattern that's unfolding. And so I joke with people. I'll let you ask a question in a moment. But my line when I introduce people, how I got into astrology, I joke that it was a Pluto square. And so basically, when I got home, Pluto had traveled that far around the zodiac and was squaring its natal position, and Pluto being the journey of the soul. For me, it's, my soul journey this time around is about boundaries and around, how do I find those and maintain those and develop effective ones within human relationships. I got an extremely serious soul lesson about that, and it didn't mess around. It really took me out, but actually was what guided me into astrology. And so out of the destruction and collapse of my life, as we were speaking about before the call, it's been my rise of the phoenix. It's been my, another of those phoenix processes through my life, which ultimately is strengthening me. But Pluto works by removing everything that isn't real. And it does it in a very uncompromising way. It is not up for negotiation. And so many of people listening will have been through experiences, Plutonic experiences in their lives, where things just disappear. What is not meant for you is just gone. And so those experiences can be extraordinarily traumatic and extremely difficult. But it's given me, even just that knowledge has given me the ability to be there for people in much deeper ways, because I have an appreciation for what their soul is up to in this life and what it is they're trying to do. And through breath work, I can help facilitate that process for them and help them evolve along their path in a more, I guess, nuanced and tailored way. So,
wow. I mean, this feels like to me something that everyone should have access to if it's going to help support you to understand, what maybe you're experiencing at a certain time, or how to maybe approach something. And it's reminded me, actually, just hearing you talk about a conversation I had just last week with someone who's also opening up to study astrology, and was talking about a relationship, and their partner was going through something, but she said it was in his sign, and he's a Scorpio. And I said, oh, I'm a Scorpio. And she's like, well, and I said, I was feeling something last week or whenever the time was. And I said, which day? And she said, yeah, that's the day, because there was something going on with the planets. And I was like, okay, so I don't remember exactly what it was, because something probably to do with the Pluto Cazimi, which I think was recently. Is that right? Was it Pluto Cazimi?
That is, yeah. It went behind the sun. Exactly.
Yeah. So there was something moving and something shifting, and it was going to impact me as being a Scorpio in a certain way. And I was like, gosh, if I had more awareness of that, then I could have been like a little bit kinder to myself. I could have processed it a different way, or helped me to understand it. So I find this fascinating. And for you to be a practitioner in breath who's also working with the astrology in this way, it's going to be a huge support for people.
It is, yeah. I really believe, Jessie, and again, it's like you get into something and become slightly evangelical about it. But for me, astrology gave me a tool for synthesizing complexity. The archetypal language of astrology, once you have a sort of, I guess a basic grasp of what these archetypes are about, they really open you up to a whole nother dimension of experience. And certainly the Pluto journey of the soul, having been through, and being a Scorpio as well. I'm born at 0 degrees of Scorpio, so an astrologer would say that's it's not that it's more powerful or anything like that, but I'm here to learn my Scorpio lessons, and and I'm like a brand new Scorpio, and life has been really difficult at times. Some really unfair things, in my opinion, have happened. It hasn't. My breathwork journey is as stimulating and as life enriching and as magnificent as it's been. It's also involved facing into some of those darker aspects of myself, some of the darker aspects of life. And that symbolized, actually one of my astrological awakenings, if I can share it here. I went through some crazy shit over in Scotland, and I true male style, I decided to run an Ironman triathlon to burn it out of my body and to regain a sense of myself. And I remember I was on the marathon, or it was a half marathon, and for those purists out there, I was doing a half Ironman triathlon at that time. And it was the hottest day I think I'd experienced in Scotland. It was about 26 or 27 degrees. So
wow.
which is
Scotland,
lightweight compared to Australia, but in Scotland, like, the buildings aren't designed for the heat, the people aren't designed for the heat. And they had this big blower out over all the athletes running at the end, spraying water out. And I remember thinking, I didn't even know why would they have one of them in Scotland? But fortunately they'd brought it in. But I had this, I guess you could call it a waking vision of sorts, or some sort of, fatigue induced or exhaustion induced vision. But it connected in with my breath work. And it was something along the lines of, in order for something to be reborn, first it has to die. And that might sound a little bit harsh, but it's true. You know, we go through phases in life where we have to have our big boy and our big girl pants on, because serious shit happens, and some of it is really unpleasant. And what I'd been through was really unpleasant, and took me, in some ways, still, you know, attempting to work through that. And anyway, I messaged my it was an emotional abuse coach who was helping me out, you know, get through the experience that I had. And it was so profound. The experience was so profound that I sent her an email, and it was all about the phoenix, because that's what it appeared to me in that, you know, in that moment of, you know, it was the phoenix process. You know, in order for something to you know, rise from its own ashes, you know, first it has to burn. And anyway, it was a couple of weeks later, she emailed me back, and she said, "I'm so sorry, I've just been moving house, blah, 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 blah." She said, "But you're a Scorpio, aren't you?" Because Scorpio has 3 symbols. And so apparently, and this was all new to me, this was pre-astrology, anything, you know, I was just reading this image going, what the hell? And so, so people be familiar with the zodiac wheel. You've got, you know, like Aries is the ram, and Taurus is the bull, and, you know, Gemini is the twins, and Cancer is the crab, all this kind of stuff. But the archetypes actually have lower and higher expressions. And so for Scorpio, people are renowned, well, Scorpio is renowned for the sting in the tail, being secretive and deceptive and all this kind of stuff. And passionate, so that's the lower form,
I like to say.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the Scorpion, right? The Scorpion runs around into all the darkness, all the, you know, it hides, you know, it's a nocturnal animal, all these kinds of things. It's a ground dwelling animal.
Yeah.
The evolved version of Scorpio is the eagle. And so we rise up above that, we learn our lessons, and then we rise up and proudly sit up on the perch and survey things, and are able to, you know, but unfortunately pride comes before a fall. And the third evolution of Scorpio is the phoenix. And that's when we evolve, not through the lessons of this 3-dimensional world, but we move into our spiritual power, we move into our spiritual journey. You know, you've spoken about that before, Jess, and that usually involves the structures of our lives completely collapsing, and shifting us into perspectives that in some ways we can only access through trauma, we can only access through, you know, these extremely difficult experiences that can find their way to us. But I when I was reading this, I had chills, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is something that I need to pay attention to. And so I trust the old Google, and lo and behold, you guys, if you listen to this, you can do it yourself. If you Google Scorpio Phoenix, you'll see these 3 stages of evolution that those of us blessed with strong Scorpio signatures in our chart tend to draw. And I've seen that in my own life experience when I find out a little bit about somebody's astrology and then hear about their life story. I've got a friend of mine, he's 2 years older than me. He went through very similar Pluto square stuff to what I did. He just did it 2 years ahead of what I did. And it wasn't exactly the same, but there was similarities there. And again, I didn't need to say anything to him, because he probably would have thought I was crazy anyway. But it gave me the skills to be able to link that up in the background, and then be able to approach his situation with much more compassion, because I could understand, you know, what he was going through from a soul journey perspective. And I was actually able to have an off the record conversation, you know, with another friend who was attempting to help, by sharing some stuff about my own Scorpio signatures, my own way of processing, my own way of operating, because astrology has given me a tool to understand myself better. You know, being a Scorpio, a lot of my feelings were very strong, very scary, very overwhelming. And learning to work with my emotional body has been, I think, as we spoke about, you know, the first time we were on live, you know, it's been pretty overwhelming, and it wasn't stuff that I really wanted to do. You know, I was quite happy to have it all filed away under the do not touch.
Yeah.
But as we know as breath workers, there's no around, there's only through. And so my journey has been going through those, you know, these, you know, death, birth or rebirth cycles in my life. You know, a lot of people have commented on that, of, you know, my life is, you know, since my entire life has been a series of these types of processes. And so, exactly as you say, you know, having the appreciation of the deeper patterns, and that's essentially what astrology is, right? It's an appreciation of the deeper patterns, the unseen patterns that often get shrouded in this sort of mystical language, but are very observable and repeatable. And once you start knowing what you're looking for, it's kind of all around you. And for me, starting to see it in the way people breathe. And we've seen some amazing things on even just on our breathwork calls, and I've been able to facilitate at a deeper level, because even the affirmations sort of come from a different place, and they weave together from a different place, and I kind of tune into their breath in a slightly different way. And I guess I'm still in the stage of learning and refining and mastering myself, but I'm hoping, as we did a little bit last April, didn't we, of sharing some of this archetypal work with the guys that came along to our training when you were here in Oz. And for me, astrology is it's a blend between the intellectual and the spiritual. But even over that 4 days that we were training, it was amazing, the synchronicities and how things linked up, because I structured the session in alignment with the signs of the zodiac. And so we used the different archetypes for each of the different sessions, and the themes, so for the Sagittarian session, we focused on gratitude, being ruled by Jupiter. Scorpio session, we went into the water, being a water sign, and the rebirth that happens in the water. And the Aquarius, we taught the guys a little bit of facilitation of how do they share this with other people, and how do we connect into our own shared humanity. And then Pisces, we spoke about spirituality and our place in the bigger the bigger system of consciousness. And so for me, it's really exciting on one level of we've got this amazing tool of breath, and we've got this fantastic training program that people can go through with the Transformational Breath Foundation, if that's what they choose. But this can then take their practice to a whole nother level, because it gives us that, I guess, that spiritual language, if you will, or that symbolic language that allows us to navigate with these deeper patterns of the human experience. And so who knows where it'll evolve to next, but yeah, it certainly seems to work. The astrological stuff certainly seems to work, and the results I'm getting over here are pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, I've seen it firsthand when I was out there, Russell.
Yeah, it's cool, hey? It's cool.
Really cool. And you've talked to me about this before. So it was a couple of years ago when you first introduced to me, the different layers of the sign, and we had the conversation about the Phoenix, and I was like, I've literally called my business Phoenix Breathwork, because I've always felt connected to that. And it is about the rebirth and starting again. And I've always known, being a Scorpio, there's a certain intensity to me. And, I have certain experiences that I'm like, oh, okay, here we go again. Oh, here we go again. But it's like you come out the other side. So just to have this conversation with you and to understand it on another level, it's just, I think it's fascinating. And I think it helps to get to know yourself better, as well as how you can relate to other people and understand other people. So please keep doing it. I want to learn more. I'm always finding it fascinating. And the way it's all, it's just showing us more and more how we're all connected in some way, the planets, us, our breath, we are all connected, and it's all linked somehow. And I used to say as well, because when I first started paying attention to the moon and moon cycles and what that meant, and then I'd think of our breath cycle and how, life is cyclical. And I often think of a breath as a full moon cycle as well. The inhale, like the new moon, creating new intentions. The exhale, it's like the full moon letting go. And it's like just trying to think of it like that. And it's like, yeah, we are all connected. So why not where the planets are, what the planets are doing? It's all just, fascinating. Like my mind is like processing so many things right now. I think it's brilliant, Russell.
It's crazy. Hey, I was, what just popped up to me when you were talking. I remember back to my my 4B training in Italy. Yeah. And I was sitting around the lunchroom, having lunch or breakfast or one or the other. The chat turned to astrology, and given my own, I guess, level of understanding at the time, my eyes were just like, oh gosh, here we go. And but anyway, they were asking people signs, and I said, oh well, I'm a Scorpio. The table just went silent.
Really?
And one of the ladies goes, ooh, I didn't think you would be a Scorpio. You don't. And I was like, hey, what's wrong with being a Scorpio?
Really? That's
So yeah, we
amazing.
get a little bit of a bad rap when it comes to people who have been bitten by the scorpionic tail. But
Oh, I get that where
yeah,
it's people like, oh,
we're just deep.
I thought you were Scorpio. Oh yeah, I can see that. Oh, that makes sense. I'm like, what?
That's what you
Yeah.
I kept my scorpionic nature a little bit more hidden. But like you said, that's something that I do notice in sharing, astrological readings and the like with people, is when you start sharing the archetype, if they have a level of self-awareness about them, quite often things will link up for them in a way that, they've never really
Mm,
associated before. And
yeah.
yeah, I find it a tool for yeah, just it lets you, maybe this is a Scorpio in me, right? Of being able to see beneath the surface, being able to sort of slightly covertly, develop a deeper understanding as to, how someone's maybe fitting together, and how we can be most helpful, which is ultimately what it's about, right? It's not about geeking out and finding out everything about somebody. It's about how can you come up with, the best session that you can create for somebody that's going to facilitate the most change for them in the most, I guess, integrated and compassionate way. And like to use the example of the guy that, the Gemini guy it gave me the peace just to sit there and listen, because I knew that that's what he needed, and he, he was going through some horrendous stuff. And, for me to be like, all right, shut up now, breathe. I knew that he needed, that was his way of getting to a point. And he did, he got to a point where it was like, ah, oh. And then he relaxed
Yeah.
and we lie down and breathed, and he had an amazing session. And the couple of times that we saw each other really helped him move forward in what was, some really, I guess it speaks to the strength of both astrology and breath work of then giving him the ability to work through his experience with, with his breath, but doing it in a way that was in complete alignment with how he processed and functioned in the world. And that in some ways, people talk about astrology going, oh, well, that's a good sign and a bad sign and a tough transit and all this kind of stuff. In my experience, it really is always context dependent, and not one to really prejudge, because we don't really know with astrology. It's a symbolic language. It's not going to give you, and it's usually in retrospect that we link it up and go, oh my goodness, isn't that amazing how synchronous that was? But it's not a tool for going, okay, well, it's going to be this day, this time, you're going to meet this person, and it's not really what it's about. It's not sort of cheap thrills, fortune telling stuff. It's about working with the deeper cycles of life, and even that perspective shift, of as you're talking about, like the lunar cycle with the breath, or however we choose to represent it. It's understanding that, that everything is interconnected and everything is happening simultaneously, and we only ever understand just a tiny, tiny bit through the lens of our consciousness, everything else that's going on. And as astrology for me connects me up with my ancestors, my ancestral, lineage, my relationship with my own humanity, realizing that I'm just the latest step in a very, very long line of people that have sacrificed a huge amount to allow me to be here and experience this world in such a privileged way. I'm teaching people to breathe, for goodness sakes. Do you know what I mean? Like, my grandfather used to be a milkman, and he, was up at 4 o'clock every morning, cleaning out horse stables, that kind of stuff. And, for me to, it connects me back into where I came from, and yeah, my place in the cosmos, not just from a space, but from a time as well. And then, yeah, this evolutionary journey that we're all going through now, the world, I don't think I need to go into it here, but, it's a pretty chaotic place out there. There's a lot of uncertainty and some really wild stuff is going on. Astrology can explain, not exactly, once again, but it can point out some of those themes and some of those, some of the reasons why we're seeing what we're seeing. And, that we've got Pluto moving into Aquarius at the moment. And this is, this talks about, a rebirth of technology.
Yes, this is what I'd like you to share a little bit more on, because I'm hearing a lot about what's going on with the planets at the moment. Like I said, Pluto Cassimi and Aquarius, Pluto going into Aquarius. It's not going to happen again for 20 years or something like this.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
big things are happening. And some astrologers who I follow are like, set your intentions now, because this is what you're entering for the next 20 years and things. So there is something happening on a collective scale as well. It's not just individual signs that can be impacted. It's on the collective. So is there anything you can share a little bit more about that, if anyone's curious to know what to expect or understand a little bit more about what's going on?
Okay, so for reference, what date is it we're recording this? I think it's the
6th.
The 6th of February. So that timestamps this conversation. So whenever this happens to be released, you'll know that this is when we were recording this. So there's a couple of key things for people to know about this year. As you were mentioning about Pluto, so remember I was mentioning at the beginning about, we've got the outer planets that move much slower. So the fact that Pluto is changing sign is really significant because it doesn't happen very often. And so it's been moving through Capricorn since 2008. People who, will remember what was going on in 2008. We had the banking crisis, the financial crisis. So Pluto, again, the Pluto, the Phoenix, the rebirther, the bringer of how would you say, what does Pluto bring? Pluto brings renewal. Is a good way of putting it, of renewal. And moving into Capricorn was a sign of top-down structure, hierarchical thinking, all this kind of thing, or hierarchical organization, I should say, rather than thinking. And so Pluto, when it moves into a sign, it reveals the shadow, and it reveals and heals the shadow of the sign that it's moving through. And so it's why this last 14 years, which is culminating now, is we're starting to see all this corruption come to the surface. People are going, oh my goodness, I can't believe these organizations were as twisted and as warped as they are, that Pluto's brought it all to the surface. So that's part of it finishing its movement through Capricorn and then moving into Aquarius, where, as you say, it's going to be for the next 20 years. It was in Aquarius when you were over here last year for that couple of weeks. It's here for the next 7 months. So in September, it's going to go back into Capricorn again for one last time. And then in November, it moves into Aquarius for the next 20 years. And so that's going to provide the signature for the next 2 decades of what we're likely to experience. And so it's going to be healing the shadow of all the Aquarian themes. Okay, so the Aquarian themes are humanity, technology, the future, all these types of things. Aquarian thinking is the quirky scientist. It's the innovation, the breakthroughs. It's Uranus and Aquarius is the disruptor. And so, what we're going to start to see is the shadow being revealed about technology. What are the impact of iPhones, smartphones, iPads on our mental health, the mental health of our children? What is the impact of operating at high speed constantly? We're going through an evolutionary process that none of that my milkman grandfather would have never been able to contemplate. The fact that what we're doing here right now, I'm literally speaking to London from Perth for free, right. Recorded on the phone that I carry with me everywhere, so these evolutionary processes are ongoing, but we kind of hit these pivotal points, and so we're facing into again, I guess, the corruption, which will ultimately set us free. So corruption, Pluto and Capricorn, freedom, Pluto and Aquarius. And so we're actually on the cusp of a new age of freedom and a new age of very exciting times ahead, but it's going to require a level of self-responsibility, requiring a level of self-autonomy, which is ultimately the lesson of Pluto and Capricorn, right? Because Pluto and Capricorn is top down. We look at the government to tell us what to do. Whereas Aquarius is much more egalitarian, much more, hey, everybody fits here. Everybody has their place. We're all interconnected. We're all, we all have a part to play. And so that is going to happen over a long period of time. But what we're going to see in 2024 is the acceleration of that process, because we've got lots going on in Aquarius. And so September and November are the times to pay attention to. We're going to see huge stuff going on in America. A lot of stuff going on over there. Again, won't go into it here. But essentially, what I will say is the United States is going through its Pluto return. Okay, so it's Pluto return. As we've spoken about, Pluto moves extremely slowly. It takes about 248 years to move around the sun. Pluto is returned to the place where it was on the 4th of July, 1776, at 5:10 in, I think it was Philadelphia, where they signed the Declaration of Independence. That was where Pluto was in the sky. And so Pluto hadn't even been discovered at that point. It only got discovered in the early 1930s. And so it is returned to the place where it was. So we are witnessing the rebirth of the United States of America, which is essentially the rebirth of freedom in our world. So it's a huge deal what's going on right now, huge deal. And we've seen all the hallmarks that I've spoken about, right? We've seen the kind of corruption, we've seen the deception, we've seen the lies, we've seen the, we've seen the crazy. This last 3 or 4 years has been really, really crazy because, we're seeing all the corruption that's not like always, but has been there for some time, is all coming up to the surface. And it's ultimately coming for this evolutionary process for the United States. And we're going to see, I say, a rebirth of freedom, not just in the United States, but we've already seen it in Argentina. I think there's 50 elections or something around the world this year. There's farmer protests going on as we speak over in Europe. This is all these Pluto and Aquarius themes of bringing power back to the people and setting people free. And the one for the calendars, if I'm going to do a little bit of a Magic 8 Ball prediction, is we've got a solar eclipse happening on the 9th of April. And it's an exceptionally powerful solar eclipse because it's exact to the minute. So in astrology, we've got 360 degrees in a circle, but we've also got 60 minutes within each degree. And so this solar eclipse is where the moon goes in front of the sun and blocks the sun, so we can't see it, is going to be exact to the minute with a comet known as, or an asteroid, I think it's a comet called Chiron, which moves in between Saturn and Uranus. It's known as, and it's named after the centaur Chiron from Greek mythology. He was the wounded healer. So where Chiron appears in our chart, this tends to be the wound that doesn't heal. But it's the wound that brings us the deepest life lessons and the deepest healing that can happen over the course of our lives. It takes about 50 years to go around the sun. So as I was speaking about earlier, people going through their Chiron return, usually in their early 50s, will go through this deep spiritual transformation, I guess, of sorts. And the classic one was Elon Musk when he bought Twitter, which set the internet free. He bought that during his Chiron return, like perhaps the very meaning of his life, having all these billions of dollars. He used it to restore freedom of thought and freedom of communication to humanity. So tremendously profound. But that's going to be exact with the solar eclipse. And the solar eclipse is going to be visible in the United States of America. It's moving, I think, from Maine in the Northeast down through Texas and then through Mexico. So there's a lot happening on the Freedom Stake this year. And solar eclipses, they're usually felt a month before and up to 6 months after. But they tend to bring sudden shocks and changes. They're the start of a new cycle, literally a start of a new cycle. And the earth goes dark. It's if anyone's done it, being in a full solar eclipse is really quite an otherworldly experience. And I can certainly, having seen one last year, we had one in Exmouth here.
I was going to say, you did.
I can understand why the ancients saw it as a portal and something very, very otherworldly, and something very different goes on during a solar eclipse. So they're the big astrological events for this year for people to be paying attention to. And certainly looking at the Australian chart, I think, if anyone from Australia is watching this, April's probably going to be a month for us to remember. And then I think November is going to be a month for everybody to remember, because it's going to be Pluto moving into Aquarius for as you were saying, for the last time, it's moving into Aquarius for the next 20 years. And we're going to see society radically transform and change. All the stuff people are hearing about cryptocurrencies and all this jazz and how do we blend between the physical and the digital, and we're really going to see in some ways, we're going to see society kind of go like this, and it's going to be sort of team human versus team AI, and how we resolve that is really going to be the journey of the next 20 years. And hopefully, given, it's humanity, that we're able to come back together, we're able to unite as human beings and create a world that's much more loving and prosperous than it has been, in the grip of this, the corruption that's been around for a long time.
Big shifts. So
it's big. It's a big year. 2024 is a big year.
Yeah.
And it's I actually just wrote my little. I've made myself the discipline of writing a new moon and a full moon report that I just pop on Instagram with a basic chart for people to see. And I just finished writing it before, and I think I opened it something along the lines of if 2024 hasn't been strange enough for you yet, then
and it's just February.
It's just February, and we've just had, you know, we've had a lot of shocks and surprises already, and you know, I think the one that came out today was, you know, the cancer diagnosis of King Charles. You know, there is a lot going on right now, and but the key is, you know, astrology, once again, it gives us a tool to create some of that objectivity. So even though we know that it's going to be a little bit chaotic and crazy, we can relax into it, knowing that there is a divine order and there is a divine plan, and that it's unfolding exactly as it's meant to. And
well, this is what I wanted to ask. It's, you know, this is big things happening on a collective level. You know, we'll put 9th of April in the diary, be just more aware of what's going on. But what would your advice then be for people that are hearing this or feeling this, you know, moving through this, navigating their way? Like, how can they manage it? What would you suggest if they're really feeling the effects or the impact of what's going on around them? And if there are shocking things that are going to be taking place, because it's going to rock people, like the uncertainty, the unknown, change. Oh my goodness, the fear, you know. So what's the best
100%.
advice for people to navigate this and manage their way through?
Well, I was actually speaking to a psychologist friend on Friday about this very topic. She describes herself as a recovering futurist. She's, you know, sort of realized that technology is exciting, but it's not always, you know, what it's cracked up to be. And sometimes it's the law of unintended consequences, right? And some of that is what we're experiencing right now. But what she was saying, you know, or her, and she was kind of giving me you know, I guess a compliment in a way, but she was talking about breath work as being, you know, a technology for the future, and an integrative technology for the future. And what Pluto in Aquarius is going to be asking us to do is develop our own self-reliance, our own ability to work with our own experience. And so I guess the first tip is staying present, you know, because ultimately the present moment is all there is. And the best way of accessing the present moment is with a conscious breath, you know, in my belief anyway. I'm sure there's other ways, you know, people do things however they choose to do them. But it's really, you know, and the breathwork journey, as we've spoken about, you know, it's not necessarily a comfortable one. You know, we're not going to sit here promising that everything's going to be smooth sailing. But you know, what comes to mind is, you know, we know we're progressing along the path of growth when it hurts more, but it matters less. And so part of my opening process to this is, you know, and sometimes I still struggle when I really think about, you know, the devastation that so many people are experiencing around the world at the moment. And there's unnecessarily conflicts and wars and children and all this kind of stuff. It's a lot, you know. And so I think part of the first step is having compassion with ourselves, that if we're aware of what's going on, that it's a lot. And so we've got to be really, really gentle with the information that we consume, not getting too overwhelmed with what's happening. But at the same time, for me, you know, I've made the personal decision to anchor myself as close to the truth as I possibly can, for better or worse. You know, sometimes it's been for worse, but it's how I manage my own mental health. Because I, you know, some of the stuff I was sharing about, you know, my triathlon and you know, the experience that took me into that was emotional abuse, and I'd experienced gaslighting firsthand, and it's a tremendously destabilizing experience. For anyone who doesn't know what we mean by gaslighting is, you know, gaslighting is it got its name from a film, which I think was 1940 or something like that, late 30s, early 40s, and it was the story of a man that's trying to drive his wife crazy by constantly changing the brightness of the gas lights. And when she asks him, is the lighting different in here? He says, no, it must be you. And that process, if anyone's experienced it in an intimate relationship, is extraordinarily damaging. And not being able to function in a reality. And my suspicion is we're going to be experiencing some of that on a wider scale. And people are going to be feeling destabilized. They're going to be feeling that they've been lied to, or they've been misled, things that they've assumed as true are not. And so working through some of that is not necessarily going to be easy. But it's having that recognition that, and part of my own journey with, you know, emotional abuse was learning to forgive myself, learning to forgive myself that, I'd made decisions in good faith. I trusted somebody in good faith. That trust was misplaced, but that was the lesson, and the lesson was to forgive myself. So I think, as we journey through these things, if anyone gets to a point where they go, hang on a minute, things are not really what I thought they were, or, I've maybe said things that were, I now realize that were wrong, or I'm maybe embarrassed about, or whatever. It's learning to develop self-compassion and self-appreciation and self-love, which again, I guess kind of sound, in some ways it sounds a little bit woo-woo, but I'm meaning it in the real practical sense of having compassion for ourselves, giving ourselves a break, knowing that it's okay not to have all the answers in this moment, that we can just be here now, and that is sometimes enough. And that's ultimately what Pluto and Aquarius, what this Aquarian couple of decades is going to be about, is bringing us into now, bringing us really into the present, and it's becoming less of a how we say, like a mantra for spiritual seekers, and more a practical way of functioning in the world, of being completely present, being here now, and whatever it is that we're doing, whether that's operating in a board meeting, or whether that's playing with your kid, or whether that's surfing a wave or driving your car, is bringing ourselves back to now, and some of that awareness of even if there's crazy stuff going on in other parts of the world, there's nothing happening here right now, and to be fully present, connected with people that we love, enjoying the simple things. And it was funny, my friend I was sharing about the psychologist, she was talking about how proudly she has an iPhone 8. And how it's considered, for people mixing in her circles, these futurist types, it's pretty much it's the equivalent of a Nokia 5210 having an iPhone 8.
Yes.
And but part of that is also it's going through that evaluation process of, is this serving me, is it not serving me, is being plugged in serving me, is it not serving me? And if it's not serving me, I let it go and I stop doing it. And how do we learn to utilize technology rather than depend on it? How do we let technology amplify our experience rather than dictate it? And those are obviously personal choices for people to make for themselves. But certainly it starts for me, that journey inside, centering ourselves, becoming more and more comfortable with our inner space. And all of that is, as all too well, is, that's what breath work can give us, right? It can give us access, comfortable access to inner space, to be comfortable with discomfort, because we ultimately know that it's transient. But we're also not getting caught up in our old patterns. We're not getting caught up in our stuck stuff. We're learning to, do the Saturn, learning to let go, learning to allow this. Okay, it's reached its limit. It's enough. It's gone now. And so that,
it is a learning to do that, and just come back to what you said about being kind and patient with ourselves as we do that.
And the key, as you said just then, Jessie, it's learning. It's having compassion enough to learn things. To be comfortable in our beginner's mind, comfortable not knowing. And I think that in itself is kind of a strange form of mastery, of being comfortable not knowing, and being comfortable allowing things to materialize. Small but great example today. I ended up being double booked on Friday, thinking, oh no, what am I going to do? And then an email comes through, oh, can you change the date till Saturday? Okay, great. But the problem kind of just solved itself, and it's only a very small example, but learning to ride those synchronistic currents, learning to go with the flow of what is the wider system sharing with me here, and how do we learn to trust our intuition? How do we learn to to listen to our gut instincts? As the conversations we've had before, right? What's got us into trouble has been when we've overridden those. We've let our heart override our gut, and the gut is the survival instinct. The heart tends to be the connective one. And again, bringing it back to it, right? This is Mars and Venus, and Mars is interested in our safety. Mars, is the warrior. Mars is what protects us. Mars is the instinct to say, hey, no, fuck you. Whereas, the heart is the you know, well, I want to be connected, and I want to feel good, and I want to, you know, care about other people, and I want to, you know, I want to have healthy relationships and all these types of things. I heard it described, you know, Mars, what is it? Venus is what we want. Mars is how we get it.
Love that. Love that.
And
Yeah.
and so yeah, but it points to astrology, right? It's about learning about ourselves, learning what we're like in crises, learning what works for us, learning, you know, how do we set out the ground rules for our interactions with, you know, with the people in our lives in all varieties, you know, and you know, I guess for me, you know, I've tried to frame, you know, what's been a pretty bumpy breathwork path at times. So it's kind of setting us up for these times, right? Because
Yeah.
I was saying that to someone just the other day. I think of breathwork as a technology. You know, it's a conscious technology. It's a tool of our consciousness. It's something that amplifies our life experience. And so it's not just breathwork. It's other healing modalities that are out there are going to become increasingly, you know, into the fore as our sort of our rigid Capricornian structures get shattered by this, you know, this Uranian blast that's already here in many ways. And so it's going to be a process of, okay, well, how do we reconsolidate? How do we, you know, maybe pick up the pieces of what's broken and put them together in a more beautiful way, you know, with a deeper understanding and bringing, you know, what we've learned with us rather than throwing it away. Probably the last thing I'll say, Jessie, actually on the Aquarian archetype and Uranus and Pluto and Aquarius and all these kinds of things, is one of my favorite expressions when coming into talking about Aquarius is the baby in the bathwater. And with technology, you know, it's wonderful to have new technology. You know, when people went from, you know, cars to horses, it saved a lot of time, you know, trouble and all these kinds of things. But a lot of people lost their connection with their animal. You know, they lost the meaning that they got from the relationship they had with a living creature rather than a mechanical one. You know, you could say the same. It's great. You know, I can still remember Steve Jobs going, "Hey, look at this is the iPhone. We've got an MP3 player and your phone, and you can text and you can, you know, search the internet, all these kinds of things." And everyone went, "Wow, isn't that amazing? We can all do these things really, really super fast." But we lose something. You know, we lose the effort that it took to do things. And quite often there can be meaning in that effort. There's meaning in the struggle. There's meaning in things not being exactly as we want them. And so whilst technology can, as I say, it can accelerate that process and it can give us that immediate dopamine hit, we've got to be careful, like, you know, with my friend not upgrading her phone from an iPhone 8, of taking time to just be in the real world and to experience and enjoy ordinary things, ordinary connection, ordinary interactions, you know, that you get in a face-to-face conversation. And as amazing as it is that we can talk and you're in London, I far preferred it when you were here and we could hang out and have those normal, ordinary conversations, and you learn more about people when they're just doing normal stuff. And so we want to, you know, in our quest to, you know, to accelerate our life experience and to progress, it's about not forgetting the things that are actually the most important, and that we remember to keep our humanity, because that's something, certainly in my opinion, the last few years it's been sadly lacking. The fact that, you know, every one of us matters and every one of us has a part to play, and so I do think that that's really going to be this next 20 years is we're going to see the birth of a new type of human and a new type of humanity, and in my ideal would be hopefully one that values and remembers our past as an intrinsic part of who we are. Doesn't define us, but it helps us remember that we're, as I say, we're not just navigating our way in space, but in time as well, and that our ancestors matter. And we experience that through breathwork, right? Then the number of connections people have, you know, with people that have either passed on or you know, grandparents, great grandparents, and you know, the people that are our story. You know, it's a story of who we are. That's what our history is. It's our story. So yeah.
So just small things happening this year.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit going on.
Are you guys ready for this? But it's really nice to be able to have these conversations and, you know, bring awareness to what's going on and talk about this so openly, because what you're talking about, being present and connecting to self and stuff, these are things that we should be doing, but we've just forgotten, and we don't know
Yeah,
how to anymore. So it's almost like bringing it back to basics. How can
absolutely.
I just be? And can I give myself permission to just be? I don't have to
Yeah,
be doing something all the time, or I don't have to be,
100%.
like you said, on my phone or stimulated in some way all the time. It's okay
Mm,
to just be and
yeah,
put your hand on your heart and, feel your heartbeat, take a breath, feel your breath, and come back into this moment, come back into your body. And, for many of us, figure out who you are, you know,
yeah,
figure
yeah,
out who you are, because
totally.
this came up in one of the podcasts. Actually, it's like, oh, how do you want me to introduce you? And it's like, oh, well, I don't know. It's like, who am I? What do I do? Do you want to know what I do, who I am? Da, da. And we sparked this whole conversation about that, and it's like, well, who am I? I'm a human. And it's like, yeah, I
Mm,
am. I'm a human. But we forget, not, yeah, I guess we do, we forget exactly how to connect to ourselves, how to be, how to show up, who we are. So if we can start by the basics, being present,
yeah, and
breathing.
breathing. There's nothing more simple than breath, right? Nothing more simple than breath. It's
Nothing.
I remember hearing it described as the closest thing to nothing we can do.
Right.
And sometimes that's what it's about, right? Is keeping things simple, break it back to basics.
Yeah.
And in and that in some ways is one of the best ways of diffusing complexity, or stepping back from complexity that's really getting us down, is to keep
Mm.
it simple, get back to basics. And I hope and pray that the gift for most people of this last few years is given the opportunity to really reevaluate as to what's important. I know so many people who have realized, that they're, so me included, their family connections are just
Mhm.
so important,
Yeah.
and arguably the most important thing. And
Mhm.
and and so that journey of recovering our humanity really is up to each one of us as an individual.
Mhm.
And but I do believe breath can certainly accelerate that process. And for
Yes.
anyone who's really, I'm hoping that certainly from a business side, and from my own personal journey, that we're going to see more and more people looking towards the breath, because they realize, discover for themselves how much benefit it can really bring, how much it can enhance their life experience, and really make the moment to moment experience of life far more enjoyable if we can live it fully. If we
Mm.
can we can enjoy our car ride rather than already being 30 minutes ahead of ourselves planning
Yeah.
our meeting, and just enjoying the luxury that so many of us in the West take for granted, and the privilege that we all have as part of our day-to-day lives. It's a starting point. It's a starting point. And I think and that's actually probably just popped into my head around one of the other components of this age of Aquarius, or this stage of Aquarius, we could call it, um, is individuation, and the journey of individuation, which isn't so much about, okay, becoming, I'm an individual and I'm radical and different. It's about, how do we become fully ourselves? How do we become fully who we are? And the individuation process is actually about separating from the collective, moving away from what we know. And again, it talks to what we've spoken about, the spiritual journey both of us have been on, for better or
Mhm.
worse.
Mhm.
That's part of what that process is becoming more fully ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I'm suspecting, guessing, educated guessing, I suppose, is, people are craving authenticity. They're craving what's real. They want real people telling them real things about real stuff, not this, you know, this crap of subtly trying to convince people to buy your stuff, or governments nudging us into doing what they want us to do, or banks lying to us about their motives for why they're wanting us to sign whatever. It's bringing it back to what's actually real.
Mhm.
What's actually real, and for us to be authentic and to be genuine. I think that's going to be, in all the confusion and chaos that's coming, I think that's going to be a little bit of the lighthouse for people, is gravitating towards what they know to be true. And
Yeah, and I think, sorry, yeah, and
no, you go.
well, I was going to say, and I think it's important for people like us who are doing this work to become more visible, to talk
Mm,
about this more, to share this more, because I think people will need that. You talk about people discovering breath work. I think that they are, because people are looking for a way to find that connection. And we always, well, in my experience, look externally for something. So it's like I'm searching for something that's going to make me feel better, the answers, whatever it is. And then eventually you realize, oh, it's all here. So I've been searching for something externally when it's actually internally. And for me, it was breath work that helped me with that. And I think that people will come across it the more they start to look for these simpler options. And like we say, coming back to the breath, it's there, it's accessible to anyone. Anyone can access their breath and practice breath work. And it's important that there's people like us that are telling them where to find it and practice it safely to begin as well.
Yeah, totally. 100%. I think, and I see the work you're doing over in London, and it's just, yeah, it feels like we're fighting the good fight, and hopefully, more and more people are going to be starting to realize that the only answers we ever find are inside us. Even if we think we find it outside, it actually happens inside us anyway. And we can really shortcut that process by turning that focus inside and saying, hey, know thyself. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What can I improve? What can I change? What do I need to heal? And that's the beauty of it, right? No one can take your breath away from you. It's you, it's yours, and you can work with it however you choose. And it doesn't mean you have to, be a professional breath worker like Jessie or myself, but it is an amazing gift that we all have. Even if you go biblical with it, right? Breath of life, right? At the beginning, there was Adam in Dutch means to breathe. And breath is just so fundamental to everything. And it's funny, thinking about technology, and I see it's a little bit of a trap for younger players in the breathwork field. I've seen people send me pictures of people strapped up to computers while they're breathing and trying to measure brain waves, and there's a certain irony to it all, of trying to prove things scientifically so we can all sit around and agree and go, oh yes, this is what it is. I don't know about you, Jess, but like, once you've had a proper, genuine spiritual experience with breathwork, you don't need anyone else. I don't need anybody else to validate that experience for me. I don't need some guy in a lab coat to go, oh yeah, well that was, what I mean? This is about breaking out of the matrix, right? It's about, it's a genuine reconnection to spirit, not having to conform so, we can justify some corporate guy to say, okay, well, yes, you can spend this money and all this kind of thing. I think that's really the shift that we're gonna be seeing, is a lot of that really draconian, outdated approach to things is really going to get smashed apart, and some by necessity, but also I think by evolution and people realizing that there are better ways of doing things, and in order to innovate, we have to learn to trust and learn that we aren't separate. That's what breath taught me, right? That's what breath taught me, is we're sharing the same atmosphere. We're all interconnected, for better or worse. For better or worse, we're all in this together. There ain't no getting around it. And for me, that that spiritual rebirth that I believe is coming, led out of America, I think that's I think the US Pluto return, as I was saying, is a hugely significant event, and maybe one we can talk about in the future, because I think as we go back and piece together actually what's happened, I think life is just moving so fast at the moment. It's really difficult for people to get their head around the order of magnitude of what we're actually living through, and that we are living through something that is historic and is going to change the direction of humanity forever. And my wish is that more and more people start looking to these kinds of tools and techniques, and how do they work with their own consciousness, and in a way that helps them synthesize and interact with complexity in far more effective ways. And but even that, everything aside, it all comes back. We can always sit here in the present moment, perfectly content being alive. It's why I do my little videos every morning. That was my commitment, to help people through this mess, if you will. Was anyone scrolling through Instagram can stop for 3 or 4 minutes with me each day and just enjoy the beach, and I was down there this morning, and it was you I have to thank for that, Jessie, because you were the one who got me into that habit of getting out. And I grew up in Australia, I grew up 5 minutes down the road from the beach that I go and sit at every morning. It blended into the background. Driving past the beach, I didn't even look at it. And I was down there this morning on this beautiful summer's morning, and I was like, I'm living in paradise. And it's the drama of my life behind me and the suburbs behind me that weighs me down. Here I am, lucky enough to live. You know, I have people in Perth going, it's not even a good beach. And I'm like, well, compared to somebody living in Switzerland or someone living in the Netherlands, you know, they don't get to see those kinds of beaches every day. So it's my little way of, you know, of bringing some of that presence into the world, and hopefully tapping in for people who just need a break from the crazy and a break from it all, and to know that they can, whatever they're doing, they can always reconnect with their breath. They can center themselves. They can find balance. And regardless of what's going on in your life, that's the best place to be, right? In a position of centeredness and balance, because it means you can respond rather than react to what's going on. And particularly as we're saying, you know, we're going to be moving into a lot of uncertainty. I remember I put this thing on Instagram the other day. It was like, the opposite of uncertainty isn't certainty, it's trust. And I thought that was a really useful mantra for this year of going, okay, even if I don't understand what's going on, even if I can't sense make, I can trust my breath. I can trust that my breath is part of something bigger. It means I'm part of something bigger. And as we learn through breath, right, life knows what it's doing. We might not like it, but it knows what it's doing. And our journey is to come into alignment with it, and you know, and you know, have that heart-centered trust that life is going to guide us, and you know, we can weather the storms, and you know, and that is a note I think probably maybe for us to finish on is the, you know, life really isn't about it being sunshine and rainbows all the time. You know, anyone who sells you that is deluded, in my opinion. It's the human experience is a messy one. But the deepest meaning we often find in life is in the messiness, because that's where we grow, that's where we change, that's where we find out who we are. We don't know our limits until we test them. You know, I remember that with my Ironman. You know, that to be standing on the start of that, you know, that line about to dive into the the Firth of Forth, going, I really don't know if I'm going to make it to the end of this or not. I really don't know. But they'd be able to frame that as an exhilarating experience and something to bravely step out into and tackle, rather than shying away from it. And I think that's maybe what we need to do as humans, is to rediscover our power. And that's the journey of the phoenix, right? The phoenix burns so it can be reborn and shine brighter than ever before. And I think that process is one that, you know, can only be experienced, and that trust comes through experience of knowing that even though sometimes life is really painful and the things we can go through can really suck, there's ultimately hope, you know, because as you were saying, you know, each breath we can be reborn again. Each breath is an opportunity to start over, and to bring us back in alignment with what really matters. And I think that's going to be a decision for each one of us to make as an individual over this next 12, 24, 36 months or whatever. What matters to you. So even though there is a degree of crisis, there's also great opportunity. And as you say, I think there's going to be people who are really, really looking for leadership and looking to follow people, and maybe people like you and I, Jessie, that have, you know, we just walked the path before you. When it's not that we're better or worse or otherwise. Life just took us here faster.
Well, that's it. I actually shared that in my stories as well. It's like it's my lived experience that I'm sharing with you. You know, I've been through this. This is what's worked for me. Give it a go, like, if you're ready. So, like, Russell,
the choice is yours. The choice is yours, right?
Always yours. Yes.
I often say that in my workshops. You know, I can't breathe for you. You've got to want to do it, and that's not something we can force anybody to do. People have to consciously choose to be, to take responsibility for their own mental and emotional health and their lives, and we can support you on that journey, and we love doing it, and we do that as a profession. But ultimately, the satisfaction comes from, I don't know about you, Jess, but for me, seeing people do it for themselves, and when they really get it, they really come alive, and they have that, oh my gosh, you know, I created that all on my own.
Yeah, and it's the empowerment. Like, then when they feel empowered, then for them to know that actually, oh, I can do this. I can do this. Yes.
And that's ultimately the symbol of Pluto, right? Pluto is empowerment. Sometimes it teaches us through disempowerment, but that's ultimately what it's wanting to teach us, is about our own power, and that we have much more influence over our life in many ways than we've been taught, and that, you know, if we've got the courage to face into our stuff, to face our demons, to work through the messiness, then the Uranian Aquarian themes of liberation really do sit on the other side, and the level of freedom that you can experience by consciously working with your breath is really kind of difficult to put into words, right? You can only it's far better to experience.
You've got to experience it yourself. And Russell, on that, I would love for you to share how you're working with people, and if anyone does want to reach out to work with you. I know obviously locally in Perth you're doing workshops in person, but you do work online as well. So if you can just share with people how they can reach you, where they can find you, that would be great.
Sure. So connectedbreath.com.au, easiest place to find me. All my details are there. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, that kind of thing. As I say, sharing my little daily breathwork reflections, as I've christened them, because that's really what it's about. Is, you know, teaching people. I came up with that idea because it was about walking the walk, right? Of you know, there's no point telling people to have a daily breathwork practice if you don't do it yourself. And so that's what those are all about, is just giving people you know, just a daily reminder to check in with their breath, check in with where they're at, and you know, maybe pass on a little bit about my passion for breath work, because it really is, you know, it's life enhancing, right? It's life enhancing, like any good technology should be. But the easiest way is to practice for yourself, and then to find people that can support you in that journey. So connectedbreath.com.au, as I say, and then I'm available for one-to-ones. I've got increasing number of workshops popping up around the city. I'm in City, for those in Perth, I'm in City Beach, Freo, Claremont, and I've just started up in Wangara as well. So again, hopefully numbers will start to increase over the course of the year as more and more people learn what they can do with their breath. And not all breath work is the same. I would offer that counsel as well. You know, it's worthwhile, you know, doing a bit of digging to find the right person to work with, you know, understand a little bit about their intention behind how they work. But, you know, when it comes to working through, you know, traumatic experiences and the stuff you don't want to talk about, then, you know, come find me. I can offer sessions online as well. I had one just Saturday, somebody in Mexico, and it's amazing. Even though I'm not in the room with people, you know, we see some pretty incredible things happen with the breath too. And if anyone's super keen and wants to join, we've got a regular Wednesday call as well. For people, it tends to be for people who are a little bit more experienced, but I've opened it up for people who you know, want to have access to that as well. So yeah, just drop me an email, and I'm easy enough to reach. And yeah, it'd be lovely to meet you.
Hopefully we'll be planning some more breath work out there. I would love to.
Yeah, I'd love to get you out here again, Jessie.
So good.
Yeah, I'd love to get you out. My just on that note, my network is growing. My Aquarian network is growing. And you know, I know we've said it many times, but like last year, the 4 days we had the privilege of having you here with us was just incredible. And my vision is to have more and more of that available for people. And I'm permanently indebted to you, mate, for your support, because it really made it possible. And we just, that was my peak experience for 2023. Absolutely. Yay. My peak experience.
Well, let's see what 2024 is going to bring.
2024 and beyond, right? 2024 and beyond.
Magic.
So you know, if you I think you're hopefully heading this way at some point. So if we can trust in the synchronicity of it all, I'm sure it will unfold in divine time. But everyone over here would love to see you again. So
yeah. Well, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And we're probably going to have to get you back on the podcast in about 6 months' time to see what's going on in the world.
See if anything's happened.
After what we've talked about, we'll be like, right, we need to check in again, Russell. So let's see how we go. But thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. It's been so insightful to learn more about, you know, astrology, how it fits in with breath work, share your experiences, and how it's all connected back to our breath and allowing ourselves to be. I don't know if you are able to share a little something to finish off the podcast with us. Maybe just a little guided breathe for us to just check in with our breath, or just something that you might like to share with us just to finish off today's episode.
I think given how the conversation has gone, let's finish off with the pyramid, shall we? We'll slow things down, and
Beautiful.
that'll put me in a good space to go off to bed here, because I think I don't know what the time is, but I think it's after 9 at least. So
Beautiful.
So yeah, so the pyramid breath, for anyone listening, it's just a simple process of elongating our breathing, and we just do it gradually in steps. So we'll breathe in for 1, out for 1 once, in for 2, out for 2 twice, in for 3, out for 3 times, in for 4, out for 4 times, and so on. So yeah, so if you want to close your eyes. All right, so we'll take an inhale for 1 and out for 1. So in, out, and then in for 2, out for 2, in, out, and 2, and in, and 2, and out, and 2, and in for 3, 2, and 3, and out, and 2, and 3, and in, and 2, and 3, and out, and 2, and 3, and in, and 2, and 3, and out, and 2, and 3, and 4, in, and 2, and 3, and 4, and out, and 2, and 3, and 4, and in, and 2, and 3, and 4, and out, and 2, and 3, and 4, and in, and 2, and 3, and 4, and out, and 2, and 3, and 4. And last one, in, and 2, and 3, and 4, and out, and 2, and 3, and how you doing over there?
Beautiful. That was so lovely. Thank you, Russell. I think that's one that you've done with me before. It's one of yours that you've created. I've only done that with you. It's beautiful. Thank you.
I lost count towards the end, so that's how I know it's working. But yeah, if anyone wants to practice that one, it's a great one before sleep, and you can keep going once you get out to 5, 6, 7 in and 7 out. You're usually in a pretty good space. So yeah.
Well, thank you again so much. We'll pop all of Russell's details in the show notes, so please do reach out. Let us know if anything resonated with you today, and yeah, hopefully we'll have you back on again 6 months time, Russell.
Good stuff. Thank you, mate.
Thank you for listening today. If anything resonated, then let us know below. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard, then please remember to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep reaching more people to spread the endless benefits and transformations we can experience through breathwork. I'll see you in the next episode.